This is the One Up Network. Welcome to the One Up Yours podcast for Friday, the 28th of July. Man, we got an awesome show coming up today, but as a listener service, I got to start off and say that the Shane Defense Force, this is your call to arms. You're going to need to be here for the third break. I can already feel it coming. We do have a great show coming up. We're in the first segment. We're going to do the normal stuff. We'll have the what you've been playing stuff. We have some of your question of the week answers here from the whole comic book thing. Sure, some of them were kind of interesting, some of them not so interesting.
Some of them sucked.
So, yeah, it was,
quite frankly.
It was not the best, but maybe the fault of the question. Some people said, "Hey, this was a cheap shit question," so maybe
ouch.
So
Tough crowd.
Thanks, guys.
So maybe we didn't do the right question. In the second segment, we're going to be talking to Scott Steinberg from Sega. He's the vice president of marketing there. We're going to talk to him about.
He's a brilliant man, by the way.
Yeah. Anyway, we're going to be talking to him about.
Talk to me after the break.
About development in the next generation and his putting Sega out there as one of the people who are going to be on board the Wii bandwagon from the beginning. And then coming back in the third segment, we've got Luke with tons of new stuff and hopefully a question of the week.
Hopefully.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope we get to one too. So got the four here. I know you guys will all be happy to know that not only is Luke here,
I've missed everyone so much.
but we have John and Shane as well.
Mark did a very good job, though.
He did a very good job. I missed you guys.
Aw.
We missed you.
It was nice. It's nice to be back. Though we did run into people at the Comic-Con who did stop me and were like, "You're Luke from One Up. I love the podcast that you guys do." And it's like, "Are you doing it this week?" I was like, "Yeah, dude, from my hotel room. Are you retarded?" "Oh, you're as big of a dick in real life as you are on the radio." Exactly.
It's not an act.
Yeah, it's definitely not an act. Definitely not an act. So, Shane.
Yeah.
What you been playing?
What? Xenosaga 3. I fell asleep playing it last night, but not because it's boring. I was really tired because we went and rode roller coasters yesterday, so I was really tired.
God.
I'm also, as usual, playing like Soul Calibur and Street Fighter, and there's actually some really awesome games coming in for review this month that we're just waiting on. A lot of stuff hasn't come in yet.
I call those your Halo 2.
My Halo 2.
Soul Calibur and Street Fighter. What do you go back to?
I go back to it every day. Yeah.
So without breaking anything that gets us in trouble, what are you excited about coming in for review that you're going to be playing?
We're kind of approaching that getting into trouble time.
We're kind of approaching the getting into trouble time. But just, games that are coming out in October. Like, we're starting to review the games coming out in October. So
it's nearly Christmas in magazine land.
It's nearly Christmas in magazine land. So
that means it's nearly Christmas around the office.
Yep.
I mean, people are still playing Dead Rising and Okami, which we reviewed last issue. And like now that those reviewers are done with it, everyone else is like, "Oh, I want to play those games."
Dude, I've been dying to get my hands on. I've been trying to get a copy of Okami out of somebody.
I'm good. For a minute there, I thought you were going to say I'm dying to get a copy of Dead Rising, and I was going to challenge you on it.
Wow. Although I played it the other day in the demo room for a little bit, and you know what? I kind of liked it.
Is what state of emergency should have been?
It's so fun. I was running around with a frying pan, laying out zombies.
The best weapon I've seen is a shower head. You stick the shower head in a zombie's head, and blood sprays out of the shower like a shower.
It's the kind of thing that gives video games a great name.
It's total camp, but it's awesome camp. It was fun.
Shower heads can be used as like a different sort of weapon for women, I've heard.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
That's not really a weapon.
I am back.
Luke is back. So what are you guys playing?
Yeah, Garnet.
Garnet, what are you playing?
What are you playing?
What have I
Other
been
than
playing?
The Loser?
Oh yeah,
Okay, I have beaten you.
Yeah,
I have beaten.
First off, World Cup ended like 3 weeks ago.
You guys just playing like Winning 11 like every day.
Yeah, every day. Yes.
We have Winning 11 9 or 10 or whatever the next one is. You guys are playing the old one, right?
Yeah,
Bring it over.
We have it.
Bring it over.
All
We'll
right,
play
all
it.
right.
I mean, we kind of have degenerated into this very sick rivalry because Luke won the whatever we called that World Championship of Soccer, whatever it was, to not be in trouble with the World Cup organizing facility people.
The Soccer Chalice.
The Soccer Chalice.
Nice.
So he won it, and I've been challenging him because anytime there's like a sports game out there, especially competitive, it immediately gets me like, I gotta play. So I've been playing Luke, and
Because he had to play the best.
yeah, well, hey, you are the champ.
Well,
you're the champ.
and
I have been scoring on you legitimately,
Yeah.
and I have been winning some games.
Yeah, you've won 4. I've won 15.
You have not won 15.
I'm 13.
Okay, let's cut to the
You have
chase.
not won 15. You're smoking.
I heard that Garnet broke a controller yesterday. Is this true?
That's true.
That is so. That's so immature, dude.
We're one PS2 controller lighter here at
Thank
Zip
you,
Davis.
oh wise one. That's so
someone
immature,
of your,
dude.
someone of your advanced age. I just expect better.
Some of your advanced age. age. Look, I'm going to show you my advanced age right now, okay? Jesus.
Garnet just stood up and actually unzipped.
He did.
Disgusting.
We nearly saw something wizened and old there.
Oh, Jesus.
Christ.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I actually get excited about playing games.
I don't get aroused playing soccer. That's what you're talking about.
Jaded magazine reviewers like, oh God, I have to go to work and play games today. God, wish I had one of those jobs down at the donut factory or something.
So, John, you're still playing Prey, right? Walking out of vaginas and
all the sphincters and vaginal things in the game that just seem to get,
Which one, the game or that comment?
The show.
But I'm kind of sticking with it. I think out of just I'm so far into it, I kind of want to see it through. But it's
you want to know what all this stinks from.
I really like you mentioned a couple of weeks ago the spaceship descent parts, and I wish there were more of them.
Yeah, there could have been more of that. That was definitely good.
I wish a lot of it was a bit more imaginative. It does feel a lot like a one-trick pony once you get past about halfway. But I've been playing a bunch of stuff. I played a bit more Chrome Hounds, and we can talk about this in a minute. Yesterday, I got my hands on a copy of Cooking Mama.
You slicing up some daikon?
Yeah.
Awesome.
No.
That look on your face says it's more like...
It's kind of boring.
Yeah.
Cooking is.
It did get 5s and 6s in Famitsu. Just put that out there.
I mean, I appreciate that it was an attempt at a sort of imaginative sort of take on the minigame Wario kind of thing, but it gets old fast.
Yeah, Nintendo has their actual cookbook thing that just came out in Japan. That sounds a lot more useful.
And this, I think, is essentially very, very similar. It's like, you're making... But your way into the game is you make boiled rice. Yeah.
Fuck that.
I saw the ad for the cookbook thing. I think we have it on Game Videos. I think that's where I saw it.
Maybe. Yeah.
And just to sort of lower the tone, seeing as we're down there pretty low, I have found a new bathroom game.
Oh yay!
Oh, nice.
Yeah, Magnetica.
Oh, Zuma portable.
Yeah.
Very simple. Very good for the bathroom.
Very good for the bathroom.
Yeah.
God.
So I think we've covered most bodily excretions and parts now. So
yeah, we've had
top that, Luke.
Female masturbation with shower heads. I just want to clarify.
in case people didn't get what you meant by weapon.
Yeah, I wanted to just make sure.
Oh, nice to have Dr. Obvious
Who knows,
back.
by the end of the show we may see Garnet's penis.
Only if you're lucky.
That'll take what you plan to a whole new level. I played Chrome Hounds a little bit this week when I got back. We need to
having
play.
a flashback of the Ocarina of Time.
Oh,
hello?
whoa. Jesus.
No. We're not even going to acknowledge what you meant by that.
I went. I actually, a couple of 1UP users asked me if I wanted to play Halo with them, and I haven't given my gamer tag out yet or anything. But I gave it to these two people, and we ended up playing a bunch of Team SWAT matchmaking, the three of us, and it ended up being a lot of fun. Like, they were both super good.
No, it didn't end up being a lot of fun. Tell me what you told me.
Okay,
it was awesome.
Okay, it was amazing. It was like me and these two other people, and then just a random fourth, just ruining people's enjoyment of Halo. Like, you could hear it in their voices. Like, it's like 50-13, and I'm one of those kids online.
Oh god!
And I'm like,
trash-talking
after the game's over, I was like, man, was that fun for you guys? Because I was like 21-2. Did you guys enjoy that? You guys want me to? Do you need a little rub, a little reach around after that?
Maybe I see why you like Xbox so much.
But no, it was a lot of fun. Like,
he can dominate against the second-rate players.
No, he fits right into the Xbox Live mentality.
Totally.
Being a dick.
Yeah.
Microsoft, it's good to bitch together. And then Garnet and I, again, winning 11. I play as Colombia, and Garnet played as Mexico. Gave up on the Mexicans, called them Mexicants, and
I did not call them Mexicans. Christ!
Started playing as Peru.
Okay, and why did I? So the problem with the Mexicans was that they could control the ball all through the middle of the field all day long, but they couldn't score. The Peruvians much more fun.
Do you see the problem with the Mexicans is that's the racist guy.
Jesus, the problem with the Mexican football team.
I'm glad I could turn it into something racist. That pleases me.
Wow.
The games have been good though, haven't they?
No,
the games are
all
awesome.
the games have been really good and really close.
I have
2-0 is the worst it's been.
And nobody cares.
You know what? I have a tremendous new appreciation for winning 11 because
nobody cares.
You know what? I care. So just stick a sock in it. Over it.
Yeah, we all are.
Do you guys need to take off your shirts and hug at the break?
Ew.
Ooh. Yeah, no, not at all.
Then Garnet would be naked.
So what are the readers talking about?
Yeah, we're done playing things. I think.
Did you want to talk about Chrome Hounds?
Do you want to talk about Chrome Hands?
Yeah, well, how far are you through single player? Because in
I'm
the
about
office,
halfway through single player.
Yeah, I'm about 50. I think I'm like 60%.
I've already picked my class for when
What
we
are you
go
gonna play
online.
as?
I want to be a scout.
Yeah, see, I got pegged to be the commander unit, and I started through the commander missions.
Boring.
Oh man, that shit's lo-fi. I was like, I think I'm gonna go play NCAA instead of this. So I started playing the football online a little bit.
See, I like the
Go ahead,
idea of-
Shane. Jump on him. You jumped on me when I talked about football.
No, I'm just saying Chrome Hounds is boring. Glad you're changing the subject.
Yeah, okay, whatever.
Good show. So I think. All right, skip.
Shane will be guest starring on EGM Live next week.
Will I?
No.
All right, so something that apparently no one else thought was much more interesting than that was the comic books, because I was surprised to just see the number of people who were like, you know what, this is like a cheap forum question, and they weren't down with that question at all.
It was timely. It was Comic-Con. Yeah, nerds like this stuff, right?
And I think it was kind of also driven by a lot of the fact that I saw a lot of folks who were saying, you know what, I don't want any more comic book games because the ones that we've seen so far have been so mediocre, and the ones that aren't mediocre just suck. So there's definitely that thread out there. A couple of ones that came up consistently. Sin City came up a bunch of times.
You know, I was really surprised there wasn't a SimCity game to go along with the film. It seemed like an obvious thing.
Well, they're doing another Sin City movie now, right? So maybe someone will jump on that.
So I was going to bring up Solid Snake K13 because he pointed out a bunch of things. One of the things he pointed out, though, was that Sin City would be actually a bad idea as a video game because it's too heavy on the narrative. So how would you keep the gamer's attention because the narrative is so built into it?
I don't know, maybe a narrative-driven game. I'm just thinking out loud here.
Which is funny because that was also his point. His point at the beginning was that that developers have been looking at the wrong genre when they go into video games. That they shouldn't just be so heavy in the typical beat 'em up style game.
Right. If you're doing Sin City, it needs to be like an adventure game or a
I think the people who made
quest kind of thing. Yeah.
the people who made like Indigo Prophecy, that style
they
game.
They could do a fantastic job with Sin City.
Yeah.
So that's really cool that you brought that up. I mean, did you read these?
No.
That's pretty amazing how much in tune he is because Nightmare 1.
I'm pretty in tune generally.
God, I just threw up in my mouth a lot.
Wow. Nightmare 1 actually wants Quantic Dream to do a game. He wants him to do a Crow game.
There has never been a good Crow game. There's a Crow PS1 game that will like make you cry so bad.
Well, the problem with Crow is that it's also forced and it has the illusion of being cool. It's like the kid that wants to be cool, and it tries too hard. And I think that doesn't translate. I mean, it was okay with the Brandon Lee, and then everything that followed wasn't that great.
Yeah.
But to try and force that into a video game, it's all a bit.
It's a little gothy and hot topicy.
Yeah.
Have you gone back and watched the movie ever lately? It doesn't hold up very much.
I recall liking the first one.
There was a TV show even, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was.
That wasn't great either.
No.
Surprise.
Sorry.
So Solid Snake, one of the ones he wanted was Iron Man, like done in a Devil May Cry fashion. After he said not to go just to beat him up. So I mean, you kind of get the caught.
They were making an Iron Man game, and then it got canned.
There was a Game Boy one, right?
There were different.
He's a shitty third-rate superhero anyway. Tony Stark
he's drunk. He's cool.
But he's a drunk.
He's a drunk.
Cool. He's flawed.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So it's
Like
like
you.
Narc.
He's a lot like you.
I actually took a superhero survey. It's funny that you said that. Like someone sent me one of those things like, which superhero are you?
Have you seen this show Sci-Fi's doing? This Stan Lee show where
superhero reality show.
There's a reality show where you go. People are like saying they are superhero. It looks pathetically sad.
Luke didn't get to reveal which superhero he was. I'm guessing Dazzler.
It was actually Iron Man.
Oh,
Dazzler.
You're Iron Man.
Yeah.
What's wrong with Dazzler?
They could smell the alcohol on my fingers when I was typing, I
Who
guess.
are you going to peg me as? Come on,
Professor X.
Is he a superhero?
Kind of. more or less an old man in a chair.
Kind of.
Welcome back.
Oh, game over.
All right, so
What else you got, Garnet?
I got nothing after that. I mean, good God. Anyway, back to the game stuff. Snake Fan wants to see a decent Batman game, and actually, I'm giving him mostly props because you should go read his blog post.
I would argue that there have been two decent Batman.
That first one,
Two and a half.
that seemed cool.
NES Batman was good. Genesis Batman was okay. Batman Returns for Sega CD, all right.
I got to give props to a couple of guys for just going out there. I mean, there were lots of out there, but the first one was Flee Your Mind, and even though he prefaced it, or he or she prefaced it with the, if you only know about the movie version, you'll think I'm nuts. That's all you think of when you hear Howard the Duck.
I'd play that.
You would play that.
Figures.
Right up your alley there.
Lucas can do no wrong.
Call him Shane Sesame Street. Anyway, he'd like to see Howard Duck done as like a BioWare style RPG because what he liked about
God,
I know it's crazy. It's like bizarre, right?
We'll call the doctors immediately.
I love our readers, but there's definitely some times where I'm like, hey, there's a reason you're not in making these things happen.
Blizzard announces Howard the Duck.
What attributes are you going to pick for Howard the Duck?
It gets better. So apparently
Melee
Howard
class.
the Duck, the book. The comic book was known for satirizing popular sci-fi and fantasy stories like Star Wars and Conan the Barbarian. So the suggestion then goes that the game would satirize modern powerhouse games, like it would make fun of Grand Theft, Metal Gear, Resident Evil, Silent Hill.
John's just taking that away from Garnet because he could feel you stop listening.
Maybe this kid's on something. Maybe not.
Nick Lott wants to do Grendel, which he left a.
This is the kind of stuff I was expecting this to be.
Yeah,
I thought people like that with actually, people were objecting to this because it was a softball question. I thought people would dig into like
interesting stuff,
edgy, interesting, not obvious comic.
Yeah, like I've never read Grendel. I've heard of it.
Things you haven't heard of. So anyway, apparently Grendel is a genuinely evil person becoming a hero, and likened the game that they would want developed to be like a cross between Godfather with the the territory and open-ended part with the fight mechanics of like a Ninja Gaiden. That's got potential. It's got potential. G.I. Joe came up a couple times.
Yeah, it's never been done well.
What? The NES version is
Formula
awesome.
50 brought it up.
I don't like the NES game.
Well, I'm not surprised.
And then Franco-chan's brought it up here and said that basically they'd like to see like a Team Fortress 2 or Freedom Fighters kind of take on G.I. Joe, which is obviously like a tailor-made. I'm surprised no one's done like a mod.
Yeah,
just a G.I. Joe mod. That would be pretty fantastic.
I bet you $1 someone points out a G.I. Joe mod.
Okay, that would be cool.
Boards.
And we'll get that to you. And the other one they suggested was Calvin and Hobbes done as a cel-shaded 2D side scroller. That could be
kind of Behemoth style.
Yeah, and that was like the suggestion was actually the first one was Beautiful Joe, but then moved over and said, what about Behemoth? That would be really cool. So
I'm not sure what you would do in a Calvin and Hobbes game.
You could roll down a hill in like a barrel or something. What do they do in that?
Play imagination games. Mm-hmm. That would be the whole thing. Like, I'm imagining. Now we're at war, Hobbes.
You could be a metaphor for theological discourse.
Yes, it could.
God, that sounds awful.
I have some other interesting stuff people have been talking about that weren't questioned of the week. And rather than like quote, I think there's just some threads on the board that people should check out. There's a couple of threads which are in the title are called the board members pile of shame. That there are now multiple.
I saw that. One of the ones they're doing is Free Space 2.
Free Space 2 and System Shock 2. Both of which are proving very popular, so you should go check those out. Then Poop Master Funk.
I love that
name.
dude.
Has a great name. Has a thread called Will You Let Your Kids Play Games, which seems to be accelerating in terms of the stuff people are jumping on. So any of you with kids, that's definitely worth going and taking a look at. And then Beige wrote about a bazillion words, which has prompted a further bazillion words on your thoughts on the negative stigma of video games and gaming, where he poses a question: how strongly do you perceive the negative stigma of video gaming, if at all? Do you lose any sleep thinking about it? Does it even cross your mind?
Obviously inspired by the crippling shame he revealed last week.
Well, he
didn't serve a pie this time. He opened a whole pie shop.
Right. He actually opened up with, after listening to the shrill sound of my own words echoing over the airwaves in last week's podcast, I started thinking seriously about the subject of gaming and the negative stigma which has traditionally been associated with it in the public eye. So he then tells a story about something that happened in grade 9.
Wow.
It's a very revealing history of Beige.
That's at livejournal.com/beige.
But there's a lot of there's some interesting debate there. So if you do feel strongly one way or the other, it's definitely a thread that I think is going to be floating up near the top a lot for the next week. So
don't be ashamed, Beige. Don't be ashamed.
It's Beige. It's well written. It's well thought out, and so you should dig into it and take a look at it. Sometimes, as we talk about comic books that have become games, sometimes games also turn into comic books, like Sonic, right? Didn't turn out so well as a.
I see what you did there.
It's like, yeah, you see that? It's a cool trick.
That was a transition, I think.
That was a transition. And coming back in just a minute, we're going to be chatting with Scott Steinberg, the Vice President of Marketing over at Sega, and he's going to talk about the Wii and Sonic and the future.
You're listening to One Up Yours, part of the One Up Radio Network.
and welcome to the OneUp Radio Network. If you know the name of the podcast you'd like to hear, press 1 now. You have selected Radio PM, starring the editors of the official U.S. PlayStation magazine. To download an episode at radiopm.oneup.com, press 1 now. To listen to a promo, press 2 now. Hello, and welcome to the OneUp Radio Network.
All right, and we're back with Mr. Scott Steinberg. He's the Vice President of Marketing over at Sega, who we invited in because he had a really interesting quote that kind of tied into some of the next-generation development issues we've been talking about, especially with the Wii. I think John's pulled the actual quote that we have, right, John?
Yeah, we're going to face you with your own words.
I can take it.
Huh? You can take it?
I can
so,
take it.
you said, apparently, to an online news site, that the pundits are missing the point when it comes to Wii strategy. Not every third party is late to the launch. So, I mean, what we've seen a lot is that everyone seems to be focusing on PS3 and 360, and the assumption, I think, from everyone is that it's all first party, it's going to be on Nintendo stuff on Wii, but you think different, right?
I do. I think I did say that, in fact, that the pundits have thought that most of the third-party companies are going to miss the Wii launch, and they won't be benefited by the strong way that we think Nintendo will get out of the gate, and Sega is not one of those. So I felt we needed to raise our hand and talk about the exception to that rule. Sega has been a part of the Wii momentum since a year ago E3, so we're shipping a launch title as well as another game in March right after the launch window, so you'll see Sega all over the Wii. That's one of our core strategies.
So are you doing exclusive stuff on it?
We are. I think in most instances, companies will recognize, if they haven't already, that Wii takes a certain style of development that's different than their next-gen approach, and those games are going to be, to really tune the Wii the way it needs to be tuned, there will be different development and different creative processes that goes into them.
So Jeff Brown at EA said something a while ago that got us talking, and that was that if everyone's making the assumption that the Wii is the secondary purchase with something else, doesn't that make it the number one platform?
Well, if the math works, I think, quite frankly, if the math works to where Nintendo has touted it, that they're blowing it out with family-friendly fun, then they will get to a number that would get them, certain leadership without having to do this first or second or tertiary purchase in with regards to the other competitive platforms. So if they broaden this industry, who doesn't benefit by that? I think it's a great thing. We're trying to build games that are go back to the roots of when controllers had 3 buttons or less, and that easy kind of pick up and play for 8 to 80 is where we're going with our Wii strategy.
You mentioned that you thought the Wii was going to be a quick out of the gate product. What is it about that's coming out of Nintendo that leads you guys to feel really comfortable with them?
Well, there's a creative side and there's a business side, and I'll answer that from the business perspective first. They're not trying to do a lot of things that you could say have voodoo in the box. I mean, their system is, I think, a lot more approachable from a manufacturing standpoint, from a volumetric standpoint. I think that'll enable them to price it much more competitively and be more accessible to the kind of mass merchant customer, where you will see volumes really take off. I think also from a creative standpoint, the mapping that one needs to take when looking at a controller is a non-trivial design act, and with the Wiimote as it is, the accessibility will be just so much easier for whether it's kids or moms or dads to gain access to. That I think they have, a really interesting proposition on the business side, and a very interesting proposition to broadening and therefore getting quicker out of the gate from a consumer side too. So I think it's a double-sided strategy that's really working in their favor.
In Japan, the vice president of Namco Bandai, Mr. Shin Unozawa, had said that when you publish games for Nintendo hardware, the biggest rival is Nintendo because their first party is so strong, and usually it's the first party titles that sell millions and multiple millions of copies. Is that a problem for Sega? Does Sega worry that there'll be so many good Nintendo games at launch that your game might get overshadowed?
It's definitely the biggest challenge you have with Nintendo but it's a great challenge for the industry because they do so many things very, very well creatively, and innovation is one of their core competencies. So I think creatively, certainly, but the biggest problem that I think other publishers have is that they don't really focus on kids' business. And Sega has a lot of great properties, Sonic, Super Monkey Ball, and others that are tuned down a bit more for the kids market. And I think innovation is a big challenge. You've got to show some innovation if you're on any Nintendo platforms. The hardware requests it requires it, whether it's DS or now the Wii. But there's also, you got to be demographically in the right mind space and with the right characters and brands to be successful there too.
Yeah, Sega's one of the few third parties that actually succeeded on GameCube. I always point to Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. It sold over 1 million copies, and most other third party games flopped, where Sega had titles that actually hit the demographic.
That's right, and two reasons. I think Sega has a hardware company roots, so there's a definite heritage there with building brands that are tuned up for a broader base, i.e. a younger audience. But there's also, we were there at the early launch with products, and if you don't get in the first wave, it's always more difficult to build a business if you're just coming to the party second or third generation software.
So Reggie's saying this is going to be, it's broad, it's for everyone, we're broadening the demographic. Why the focus on kids out of the gate?
Well, I think it's just going to be the share of money going to the PS3 and the 360 will almost automatically make the marketing effort from Nintendo to be a bit more kid-oriented. They're it's a jump ball, really. No one knows what's going to happen. I would say, and I have no more insight to Nintendo's marketing efforts than you guys, but with let's say it's $299, $249, maybe $199 for hardware, in that range there. That's if I were Nintendo, I'd be thinking about really expanding outward from their core base, and their core base is definitely the kids. Mm-hmm. It's a younger skewing demographic is the GameCube, so use that as a base and leverage outward the embrace and expand way of going about things. And I think there's I think the other hardware platforms are already fighting over that 18 to 34-year-old.
Is that why you picked Monkey Ball and Sonic as your first two?
Yeah, it is.
Not full auto?
It is, in part because we can do more things and show more variety with the controller. With Super Monkey Ball, it's just got, it's 50 mini games, 50 puzzle games, so you can just do some things that are incredible with remote and show it off, and that's why people are going to be buying the machine to begin with. And Sonic is such a great brand and always has had a great history with Nintendo platforms that, for commercial reasons as well as creative reasons, we wanted to see that.
So was this always a strategy from the start, or did you explore things like Condemned? Because Condemned could have had a controller aspect to it, and
Red Steel sort of feel to it.
Yeah, I think it was a strategy to get our core brands that have a track record on the Cube, to get those in our first generation sense on the Wii. I'm unsure about M-rated games on the Wii. I think retail's a bit unsure about how that fits with the overall strategy. So we're not ruling it out. I've definitely seen designs that are higher on the edginess scale. But we felt from a business standpoint, we had the perfect brands to come out of the gate with Super Monkey Ball and Sonic, but we're going to be, we haven't announced them, but we'll be fleshing that lineup out with a lot more Wii content in the very near future.
Will we be seeing Western developed games on Wii? Because so far everything we're seeing is from SOJ.
Yes, you will. I think Nintendo's done a really good job of late broadening into Western developers as a part of their overall portfolio. They did some work with Silicon Knights, and they've done some work with some other other companies, and that's a great knowledge base to tap into from publisher standpoint. So we'll be doing some stuff with Western guys for the Wii for sure.
You indicated a little bit of confusion about M-rated games on the Wii. Is that something that Nintendo has aided to that confusion, or is that just something that they haven't addressed?
I think.
Uh-oh. Scott's handler just stood up.
I think it's more of a bodyguard, actually.
Maybe my meter's running out.
Hey, Steve, you might want to go grab it. Here's a couple of quarters.
You go keep yourself, occupied somewhere else.
I think if I can remember your question now, I think the M-rated games have not been developed by Nintendo. So I think that's one area that you could say there's sort of this artificial canopy on what the expectations are for the platform based on the fact that the best innovative content is younger skewing because it's from Nintendo. I think the reality is Nintendo is kind of represents family-friendly fun, and it's hard to do that when you're emptying a double-barrel shotgun into somebody and severing heads and whatnot. So I think we, as a company, Sega is absolutely not against M-rated games. Condemn was M-rated. We'll have more M-rated, lots more M-rated games actually for next gen. And whether we, approach that for the Wii is really kind of debatable internally. I don't put it against us, but I would say that out of the gate, it's probably not the best move for our company.
One thing that we've seen with Nintendo, at least in the handheld space, is they've sort of been using a revisionist approach, especially with the Game Boy and the different iterations that we've seen of it. And we've even seen it as recently as the new version of the DS Lite. Are there any concerns at Sega that the Wii is sort of another stopgap platform on the Nintendo readies something else, or are you guys comfortable in saying that you feel like this is Nintendo's next full-fledged, fully supported platform? Or a year and a half from now, are we going to be looking at like Wii 2 with HD and legitimate next-gen tech? Because right now, like you talked about earlier, it's easier to produce and it's easier to create and it's easier to manufacture because a lot of what the Wii's based off of is previous-gen hardware.
You kind of lost me on the revisionist part of that question.
Well, Nintendo's constantly upgrade. Like they'll be like, here's a Game Boy, and now here's a DS, and now here's a DS Lite. It's the same hardware. It's being repackaged and repurposed. I'm concerned from a gaming perspective that the Wii is a stopgap platform and that Nintendo's working on something else. Is this a concern that Sega has?
I don't think so. Nintendo, I think what we saw a year ago, last E3, was the company saying, you know what, it's not about Brazilian polygons. It's not about jumping into this tech race and spending on that. That they've, I think it's pretty clear that they've taken themselves and said our core competency is family-friendly fun, and we're going to bring to the table a platform that may not be space shuttle technology, but will definitely enable consumers to go back to that sense of optimism and that sense of, I want to play games and have fun and not necessarily, walk around with a wife beater T-shirt on and show off my guns to my buddies. And, I think there's something to be said for that. This industry doesn't have to forget about blue sky games. The happy optimism that started this industry is, I think, kind of got lost in a lot of the high testosterone gameplay that's come out over the last 3 to 5 years, and I think it's refreshing to have a counter argument to all of that in a sense that you can just, whether it's co-op or whether it's just having a fun experience, you don't have to necessarily coat it in blood to do that, and I think that's why we're big supporters of the Wii.
So let me jump in there for a second. So the Wii could theoretically be completely successful then without having that more mature content, because I want to argue for a second that Resident Evil on the GameCube made a really strong statement of, okay, now you've seen GameCube, you've seen the Marios and the character-driven stuff. Hey, guess what? This machine can do something else, and the audience that was an installed GameCube base ate it up. Now, Capcom had bigger hopes for it, so they did move it to PS2 eventually to get their sales.
That one game was an anomaly. There aren't other titles you can point to, really, on the game.
That's right. So it wasn't followed through on, but it did really make a big demonstration of what could be. Can we, if it wants to be a big... And GameCube didn't turn out to be a big thing after that. It kind of fluttered through the market, down there in third place. Does the Wii need that, or can it really go without having that angle?
Well, I think it can go and be successful without uber violent games. I think that we will absolutely look at Wii as a mature platform. There's no doubt that at some point in time in the relatively near future that we will be putting more aggressive content on that platform. I think the controller offers up some really cool first-person experiences and can offer up some interesting mechanics in genres that you would kind of associate with more M-rated games. It's just a matter of time. What's the right time? It's the same game that every publisher, same crystal ball that every publisher has to look at is when is the right time to kind of pour on a different development approach. And I think that there will be publishers that you can't port what you're doing on the 360 or the PS3 necessarily, but which will potentially preclude a lot of other companies from going there. But I do think that the gamers will want to have a slightly darker side to experience on the Wii platform too.
Because if it ultimately does go mainstream, how many folks are going to be content just having the character driven or the monkey balls of the world, right?
Yeah, that's right. Well, I think the harsher reality is that the system itself is not. I mean, it doesn't have the same tech as the other two, so you're not going to get the horsepower to build these massive sandbox worlds that have been been known to occupy that higher edge M-rated content. So again, I think you're not going to see companies just bringing over the same old next-gen game. They're going to have to think creatively and approach it from a completely separate perspective.
That's why they're upset. That's why the third parties are coming out and being like, oh, we didn't know it was going to be popular. All this hype took us by surprise. Now, a lot of third parties are shut out of launch, and they're not going to make any money, and they're upset about it. But it's their fault for lacking the foresight to see this as a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, it's foresight, but it's also unprecedented that there are three platforms. I mean, the history of the industry has never really. I mean, TurboGrafx, Jaguar. You can't really point to a point in time where you've seen three really succeed, and I think it's now a kind of cell division where you've got the two next gen and you've got now new gen with the Wii. It's a matter of who's got the global business perspective to make money on the Wii, and if you're not a Japanese company, you're going to have a harder time because the power of the Wii is definitely in the U.S. and Japan, and most companies don't know yet how to make games for the Japanese market that are Western based, and we just happen to do that because we're Japan based.
Well, another question for your launch support of Wii is in terms of Virtual Console. Can you talk at all about how many titles you'll have available?
I wish I could. We made that announcement several months ago at Game Developers Conference, and we're still wrestling with those details.
Do you hope to have something?
We'll rattle off a list of games. Right. You nod or shake your head.
Can you say, will there be a Sega title for
download
my
bodyguard?
on day one? Day one, will Sega be there?
I really can't comment on time or content or pricing. All of that. I've got this electrode implanted in my cortex.
So theoretically, a game such as maybe like Golden Axe,
or Sonic the Hedgehog,
or Sonic the Hedgehog, played with a Wii remote via the download service might be a possibility early on in the going.
God, that's some poker face.
It would be great for us as we reimagine some of our classic brands like Golden Axe, which we are reimagining, to be able to bring them out to the masses in their original great form in ways that are unique and marketable to remind people how cool those games were. So,
and make a nice tie-in with ongoing projects.
And to obviously be a foreshadowing of the next phase in the brand's life. In the instance of Golden Axe, we're of course shipping that on the PS3 and the 360 relatively soon. So stay tuned for that.
That's kind of why I was kind of going down that path. It would be a great way to get some of that back out there and get people back into it. One of the other notes that I had made is, you talked about hardware loyalists, and Sega certainly has a great history in the hardware business. And I know everyone's now going, ask him if he's going to make a console. I want to go a little bit different. How much do you guys think about where your Sega loyalists live, so to speak, in the video game world? Is that the Wii? Is the Wii going to be the platform they live on? And how much does that figure into your plans? When you're making your development plans?
Yeah, absolutely. This happens to be the 15th anniversary of Sonic the Hedgehog, so some of us can feel pretty old having played the game in 1991, actually being at Sega in 1991. There's no doubt that we pay tons of attention to what IP of ours from arcade, from the old Jenny days, from Master System days, are the best to bring back and reimagine for either next gen or new gen. It's a probably at least a two-dimensional puzzle, because there is not only what are the popular brands or icons that we have, but also what's creatively the right decision. Some games don't have a life after their original iteration. And it takes a certain amount of vision to say, you know what, this game plus the Wii would be the right recipe, or this game plus Xbox Live would be awesome. So it's not only just the business and the need to keep the lights on. It's also the creative side. How do we really bring Golden Axe back and make it compelling, both to the old school fans, but also make it really sing on a next gen platform and give it a good reason to come back. Not every game has a good reason for its rebirth, but that's part of the challenge of the creative side and the marketing side, is to make sure we're doing the right thing for both fans, but also for the characters. It's no great thing to see some tired old actor come back in a part that's not been built for him, and same goes, I think, for game content.
Since I started down that road, should I just ask anyway? What would it take for Sega to build another piece of hardware?
That's such a
hypothetically, what might it take for that to be an interesting situation?
Second coming.
That's such a rear view mirror question. I mean, we are absolutely a software company, and we're putting so much resources into being a diversified software company on multiple platforms that I can honestly tell you that the hardware issue is years and light years away from anything we talk about as a company.
Sorry, fans, relax, but that's the straight scoop.
I know I have a question. I know that John's sitting on one still, too. We've talked a lot about the Wii, and I feel like it's sort of a disservice to Sega's overall vision, because Sega is a third-party supporter, and we've talked pretty much exclusively for the last 20 minutes or so about the Wii. I'd like to know a little bit more about the challenges in developing for PS3 and Xbox 360, in that their hardware architecture is so different, and how Sega is positioning development and what the lead SKU that your developers are using. Are you developing on 360 and porting over, or are you developing on PS3 and porting to Xbox 360? Because last gen, you could see a pretty clear difference with some companies in the way that these ports were treated.
Yeah, there was an obvious high. I mean, this kind of ties in with one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, and maybe we can roll them in together. And we're hearing a lot that if you want to be in the game this next generation, you got to drop 15 to 20 million on a game. Which means you add a license into that as well, it gets even more expensive. So we're going to see less games and maybe some focus on individual platforms. And kind of to talk about that in terms of, is there going to be like a pecking order of platforms? Is the Wii, with Nintendo pushing it, a sort of even trying to distance themselves from the generation? Do you think we're going to see more product on Wii, and then it be really a battle between PS3 and 360?
Well, I think to hit your point first about game price, development costs, it's like buying a car. There's definitely an ante that you have to hit. You can't buy a car for $200, and you can't build a game for $700,000 these days. Although I remember those days not that far off, where it was two guys in a garage and $450,000 you get yourself a Genesis game. But the reality is that development costs, if you're doing a 360 and a PS3, or can easily be in that $10, $15, $18 million range as well, depending on who the developer is. The developers that have a reputation for producing gold and can definitely garner those kind of prices depending on the idea that they have. What games we wind up putting forth on what platform is hugely variable, and it oftentimes will be developer dependent. It'll oftentimes be in the instance of our arcade, easy for me to say, roadmap. It just so happens that we have this chipset called the Limburg chipset, and it's in all of our next gen, if you will, arcade offerings. We happen to have a very synergistic technology with the PS3 and are able to leverage that with very fast and very accurate, high fidelity conversions of our arcade games, which of course cost in the tens of thousands of dollars to the PS3. So that speed to market is evidenced with Virtua Fighter 5. It will be with Virtua Tennis 3. We'll be bringing, for the most part, as a lead platform, PS3 launches of our arcade games because of that tech handshake. Now, certain developers have been thinking about the 360 for a longer time because, of course, the 360 has been out there with development kits longer. So we see a lot of pitches that have a 360 lead and PS3 as a chaser, just because that's the way the world has kind of bubbled to the surface. But we know globally, from a pure business standpoint, we know globally that the PS3 is the machine to beat on a global basis. The U.S. market is the only one where you've got three viable platforms in today's gen. So when we look at install base, we make a real smart argument about greenlighting decisions on a global basis, and that usually, by definition, throws a PS3 SKU in there. So it's really, kind of content-based. It's really where the game is coming from, if it's our arcade roadmap or if it's brand new IP. There's just no rule, absolutely no rule that you can use as sort of the lazy thinking way of, if it's Tuesday, then it must be a PS3. Those are, it's a much more complicated set of bones and fish fins and frog legs that are put into the
sheep's intestine.
Disgusting recipe.
That's right.
It's all kind of tea leaves.
That's right.
Really? You just said that the PS3 was I'm confused by that. I wanted you to clarify. I don't know if anyone else is going to give you a pass. I can't. You said that the PS3 was going forward as the console to beat. I feel like if you're going to say something like that, you should explain to the listeners why you feel that way, because what we've seen in the way it's being produced and the way it's going to come out this fall, allegedly, it's going to be in a rough position, especially in Japan, especially in America, and especially because there's not going to be a lot of volume available for the foreseeable future. So it seems to me like you're basing that in last gen and banking on brand support. So I guess I would like some clarification for that.
Well, I think there is a lot of betting that the power of the PS3 will be in part because of the power of the PS2 and market power, that is, and on a global basis, it is the number one brand. The PlayStation is the number one brand without any fear of, I think, contradiction there. So we're to some degree hitching our wagon. We have to hitching our wagon to Sony and believe that they will sell, of course, everything that they ship in the first year, and that there will be on a global basis a serious market that will compete with 360 for next gen leadership. So there's no hiding away from the power of that brand. I don't think you can. There's just
$600 is a lot of money, Scott.
100 million people, 100 million PS2s is a lot of PS2s.
People are dropping that and a whole lot more on consumer electronics. The demographic that's why I think the separation between new gen and next gen is so interesting from a publisher standpoint, because the older gamers, the guys in their 20s, are dropping big coin on consumer electronics, whether it be monitors or new PCs or what have you. They have a high share of wallet going to this discretionary fund called entertainment. I think the threshold it's arguable how fast they need to get down price point wise before that becomes more accessible and more of a no-brainer purchase. I think it's got to be a pretty highly considered purchase now at the announced price. But I do think that the Sony brand is, without question, the one to beat. That they still have on a global basis. It's really theirs to lose.
Isn't it more of an Eastern basis now, though? Because I mean, I have to challenge that also, because I can't say that I would say the 360 is not a viable competitor in the European marketplace. You know, in Japanese marketplace, obviously we've seen the numbers. We know it's not.
It's garbage.
Right. It's done nothing there. But in Europe, it's definitely a viable competitor at the very least.
It is. But recognize that Xbox Live is a fraction of what it is as a phenomena in the U.S. So they're on the continent still struggling with broadband, and there are a lot of
technical
systemic issues that just preclude the adoption rates that we've seen in the US.
But won't PS3 with its online integration face those same hurdles and be behind the curve?
Well, I would say just how much emphasis really is Sony going to put on a live experience out of the gate is.
That's a really good question.
Well, that's an argument we've won several times.
With that.
If you find out, will you call it?
Yeah, certainly. I think from a gaming machine, I'll just go back to that earlier comment about Virtua Fighter 5. I mean, this is effectively a machine that truly now has had arcade quality graphics inside of it. The machine is more powerful than anything, and we've as an industry have been talking about arcade quality graphics for at least I know I have for about 15 years, and it's always been as good as we can make it, and we were talking about this at the Genesis level, we're talking about this on other platforms, but now it truly is on par with a $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 arcade machine. So you put that against the fact that it's also on par with a $1,000+ consumer electronics device. The PS3 is something to marvel at. I mean, it's a big piece of technology. So
it's a
fans,
Blu-ray player in
you should see the smug look on Shane's face right now.
I'm getting nauseous sitting next to the bed.
I love it when a professional comes in here and tells it like this.
God, you are such a fanboy, Shane.
I prefer the term realist.
Oh God, I'm a realist.
Don't worry. In the news segment that we have coming up in just a moment after the break, we have plenty of opportunity to continue taking him to task. So
with some real shit,
with some very real stuff.
I think it's
very,
the clarity of vision.
real.
I think the clarity of vision.
Oh boy! Hey Gaff, 10-page thread, ink.
Scott, we appreciate you coming on with us, man. It's very, very candid, really good segment. I think that every Sega fan out there heard a lot of things that they're going to like. Maybe not so hot about the no hardware thing, but I mean that's really been.
Give it up, kids.
We've been trying to tell them that for a long time.
I think we should have him back in a year and see if there's some words that we can feed him.
6 months, a year, sure.
I'm always here. I'm right down the street. So you guys, you need a filler. Somebody else cancels, call me up. John, you know where I live.
Yeah.
Well, genuinely, man, really appreciate it. And everybody out there, we're going to be back in about 30 seconds on the other side with some more stuff to dig into Shane on.
Hi, this is Jeff Green, the editor-in-chief of Computer Gaming World magazine. With me is Ryan Scott, associate editor of CGW. Say hi, Ryan.
Hi.
Ryan is held at gunpoint right now, and unless you listen to the CGW radio podcast, I'm going to shoot him. So if you want Ryan to live, please listen to the CGW radio podcast at cgwradio.oneup.com or at iTunes. Do it for Ryan. Do it for Ryan's mom.
You're listening to One Up Yours on the One Up Radio Network.
All right, and we're back with Luke to do some news, and hopefully Shane's Defense Force is in position.
Are you all right, Luke? After that last segment, it got a bit out of, it got a bit into Shane territory there.
Yeah, it's really frustrating to me when I hear perfectly logical and reasonable and intelligent people hedge their bets on brand loyalty on a sure thing.
He didn't sound like he was hedging to me.
He did not sound the least bit hedging. He was pretty confident.
He was pretty confident.
He was pretty much firm in his assertion.
Maybe he has to be. They're a Japanese company, and if PS3 fails, Sega's fucked.
Well, I mean, hey, you know what? So how about I just take this one then as kind of a little point that, maybe they're not perfect, because the Sony, according to this story at Games Industry Biz, Sony senior vice president has said that there's a possibility that the PS3 is going to lose even more money for them and that they'll be not profitable again. I mean, you have a story that they're profitable
Yeah,
this
they
quarter,
turned a
right?
profitable quarter this somehow.
Yeah, so it says they posted a profit of 32.3 billion yen, which is like 219 million euro, yada, yada,
Is
yada.
it Sony
Anyway.
in general or the games division?
No, this is games division.
He's talking about the games division. Sony in general turned a profitable quarter.
Because of Da Vinci Code, yeah.
However, the games division saw a 30% drop in revenue and a massive operating loss as a result of PS3 development, which looks further set to dive into the red. So, I mean,
Well-
the big quote here is he says, we might see valuation losses of a size that we cannot laugh away in the quarter. If your vice president is saying we can't laugh away the losses, that's some pretty serious losses.
Well, it's not unexpected, though. I mean, you spend money to make money. Launching a system is very expensive. And I don't think Microsoft is laughing about these $7 billion plus they've lost on
To
Xbox.
play devil's advocate,
Yeah.
Microsoft's turned one profitable quarter ever
Yeah.
in the games
So
division.
that's a non-issue.
Well, how can you say it's a non-issue?
It's expected.
It's not expected. Even they say right here, analysts continue to remain skeptical of ongoing success, and there's more than just the games division at stake.
I think that we're trying to stir a pot that, in this particular case, is sort of like doesn't really need to be stirred because I
Right.
think that the general understanding is you launch hardware, you lose money.
Yeah.
So
Second time I've screwed up a piece of paper this show.
Luke, why don't you have something over here?
yeah,
That wasn't aimed at you, Garnet. This is.
I'm ready.
I could just tell people were tuning out.
So game cancellations.
That's a big problem.
This is a big problem, and it's we're sort of getting a hint of the problem
Yeah.
now. That reports surfaced this week that THQ was shelving, or Activision or THQ, I don't know.
THQ.
Yeah, shelving SmackDown for PS3, and that they're moving it to next year. So what that basically means
It's
is
just
they're not-
because. I mean, this is a two-pronged thing because SmackDown and WWE as a franchise is definitely losing some.
Well, but
some
SmackDown
juice.
specifically is a PlayStation franchise. They always had WWE games on other consoles, but they weren't called SmackDown. They're called Raw or called WrestleMania or whatever. So the fact that SmackDown this fall is exclusive to Xbox 60 is a big deal. And although they're not really commenting on it, I would wager that it is a deal between Microsoft and THQ, and that is what is happening. And it's the
Interesting.
beginning of what we're going to see a lot of.
I'll buy that.
And I
Some
think
undermining tactics.
I'm telling you right now, a lot of the games that right now you think are multi-platform next-gen games coming out for both PS3, 360, and Wii are going to end up on only one console this fall.
Yep.
Yep.
So that's
Get ready.
What do you know? What's next?
I don't know a lot, and I know things are going to get announced. I'm going to put this out. This is just pure speculation from me based on intelligence I've gathered. TGS, Resident Evil 5, PS3 exclusive. I'm saying it now.
I can see that happening.
Saying it now.
Really?
Yeah.
We'll see.
Interesting.
We'll see.
It's good that you mentioned TGS. That transitions nicely into talking about the press release that Nintendo sent out this week, which was sort of this cagey press release about how if you pour over our press release, you might be able to find information about the Wii launch date. And, you know, the people looked at it and said there were like 2 or 3 dates that were missing from it. One of them is October 2nd. The others are like Black Friday and November 20th. November 20th would be a launch that would coincide directly with the PS3, which would be a shitty move. Black Friday would be too late. And so people are speculating that October 2nd is a potential Wii launch date, which would confirm what you sort of hinted at, Shane, a few weeks ago when you talked about how it would shake up the game industry if the Wii launched at TGS and would steal all of your boy Ken Kutaragi's thunder.
Yeah. Well, back on July 6th, I theorized that Nintendo is going to have an event the week of TGS, like the Monday or Tuesday before TGS, which starts on Friday. And at that event, I think it'd be really amazing if they announced that, yeah, it's coming out like this Friday in Japan and like next week in US and Europe. And that would just like obliterate TGS.
Wouldn't that create huge problems for us in the game media?
Yeah. It would.
Huge.
I think
Exciting
it would cause
problem.
great problems for publishers as well, unless, because secrets like that don't get kept in this industry. So unless it's Nintendo saying we're going to launch it with just our stuff and everyone else can play catch up when they're ready,
Which they would do.
maybe. But I mean, if they want to keep people like Scott as a buddy, they're not going to want to fuck him quite that hard.
Oh, boy. Well, to continue with the
It
launch...
kind of actually, what Scott said kind of backs it up. He was talking about, how easy it is for them to manufacture the machine,
Yeah.
implying that he already knows. I mean, basically, he sounded strong enough that it sounds like that Nintendo has given third parties some indication of how many units they've already produced.
It's
and,
really-
and that it's there and it's real and happening.
It's really easy to manufacture a slightly upgraded version of what you've been making for the last 5 years, which is what Nintendo's doing.
What inspired me originally to speculate about this early launch is the fact that we heard that they're making units in June. That's really early. That's incredibly early to be making
they
retail
deny that,
units.
though?
They wouldn't comment on it. Sony's the one who denied.
Oh,
they got
that's
all
right.
pissed off.
Yeah, they got all pissed off.
But Sony's in really good shape for their PS3 launch if you're Mark Rain. And that's what Mark Rain talked about this week, was how he felt that the PS3 was in a better situation than the Xbox 360 was when it launched. And we've talked about before, I think that the situations that the two are in are pretty parallel.
I think they're comparable.
Yeah, I think they were both in pretty rough shape before they launched. And that sort of is companioned with the NVIDIA CEO, Jensen Huang, talking to Dean Takahashi about how Blu-ray and Sony's delay of the platform to include Blu-ray was somewhat of a masterstroke. And in both cases here, with both Rain and the NVIDIA CEO, one thing that's important to keep in mind is that Rain's Unreal tech is on PS3's dev kits. He wants it to succeed. Similarly, NVIDIA did the chipset for it. So again, you have to consider the source when you see different people speaking out in favor of something, because they need the success.
They have a vested interest in the success.
Ronald McDonald likes them Big Macs.
Exactly. It's the same
You think
thing.
this is by design?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to, we've all talked to Mark Rain a bunch of times. He's really cool to talk to because he's enthusiastic.
No, I'm thinking by design by Sony. Do you think this is a coordinated, let's get the word out in a somewhat less full frontal approach?
Well, yeah, they haven't, like Kaz and Phil haven't been doing a whole lot of press lately. They have been pretty
God
quiet.
for them.
I don't know
I've
that
missed
they
them.
could. I don't know they could actually tell Mark to go out there and say something like that, though. Do you think?
Well, no, but I mean, they could certainly encourage it, and they could definitely encourage the NVIDIA guys to go out and make some. And it's in NVIDIA's best interest to go make some noise right now anyway, because of the stuff that's happening with their direct competitors. Right?
Yeah, well, the AMD ATI,
Yeah.
is that what you're alluding to?
Yeah.
That acquisition?
I mean,
Yeah,
which is a
NVIDIA needs to
great
be.
long-term
They
acquisition.
need to be like, you know,
Squawking
yeah.
so that people don't forget. But the PS3, John, it's not going to let people forget. We heard Scott. The PS3 is the system to beat going
Burned
forward.
you so much, didn't they?
Yeah, did you see my jaw set in the middle of the conversation? I thought, and then I couldn't even turn to look at Shane because the fucking
You should
arrogant
have. It was-
smugness.
It was pretty awesome, actually.
Yeah.
Shane was looking at you.
He was fairly.
Yeah, I
pleased.
bet he was.
Yeah.
God.
All right.
What's next? A study. This cool study came out this week, or it came out a while ago, but it just started to pick up this week. That talked about how video games, like other media, can serve as a desensitizing agent. And it's good to see an academic study about games that doesn't try and show some sort of causality between video games leading to violence. Instead, what it shows is a lot like what Zillman and Bryant's porn studies used to show, that like engaging in, being engaged by video games desensitizes your physiological reaction to other forms of violence. That doesn't tie to anything in a causal nature. It just means like, hey, if you've done this, maybe this doesn't affect you as much. And it's a pretty easy comparison to make. But instead of being like, it'll make you kill people,
Porn makes you horny.
it does, doesn't it? Isn't that the point?
I thought, but you know.
So wait, are you?
Maybe I'm missing the point.
Are you saying that video games are supposed to make you want to kill people by the same logic?
Oh, well, you would think, someone could read that in, yeah?
Yeah. Well, did video games have anything to do with this crime? If you followed the story for the last year or so, this story's been called the Xbox Murders. The Xbox Murders. They were just convicted in Florida. And it's been tagged in mainstream media as the Xbox Murders, when in fact the Xbox was a very small part of it. But yet mainstream media gravitates and latches on to the terminology of the X. Why is that? And that was something that we were talking about this afternoon, and it sort of segues to what we would eventually want for the question of the week. Is it seems like video games in mainstream media, more than enthusiast press, end up being demonized. And who do you blame for the demonization of video games in the mainstream media? Is it video games made this bed and they need to lie in it, or mainstream media has created the perception of how video games are being treated?
In essence, to make a story.
Exactly.
Because basically the news is relying on making stories, especially mainstream news. It's relying on making stories, getting people to watch. I mean, it is rated on the Nielsen's. They do worry on ABC, NBC, and CBS about what gets people's eyes on the screen.
And not to sort of lead the responses, but there's still a reliance on the ignorance about video games, I think. So I think there's definitely a lot for people to jump on. And this one's perfect for you, Beige.
Yeah, get them. The last thing to talk about would be Jeremy Parrish put together a really great look at the DS Opera browser that he imported from Japan and the problems plaguing it. And that was sort of the one thing that the PSP had, was the browsing functionality.
Right.
But it sort of still does. Because the DS Opera browser, according to Jeremy, slow,
Yeah.
not so fun to look at porn on two screens.
Personal taste.
Yeah, I mean,
You can zoom.
Jeremy's line
Wasn't
at the
there
end.
a new version of the PSP OS this
it
week?
does flash.
2.8? Didn't know.
Yeah.
It was like very recent.
Very recent.
Ryan was quite excited because it made him able to get the feeds on the One Up show working on his machine.
Yeah, podcast RSS is a lot more reliable now because previously, if you like, for example, this show, if you put it into the PSP browser, it was a bit hit and miss as to whether you could actually download anything, but now it works. So
Cool.
I think what we're going to start seeing from Sony between now and the end of the year is a bit more of a pragmatic approach towards all the additional functionality on PSP, because I think they're starting to admit that, hey, maybe we were a little broad with this initially. So I think we're going to see the game strategy focusing on a few products or general concepts, like they just launched the Greatest Hits initiative. Like, have you seen the Thumbs ad?
I saw a commercial yesterday.
Yeah, there's an ad on TV where they're pushing, there's like 4 or 5 games at $20. And then I think the rest of what we're going to see the push on the PSP is saying, hey, did you know it could do this? And here's how. As opposed to, hey, the PSP, it's one of these, one of these, one of these, one of these, one of these. And then, here, good luck with that.
That's how I feel with my PSP.
Right, and I think
can do all these things, but how?
finally acknowledging that they gave you this device that's way more powerful than anyone, I think, acknowledges. And they're going to, I think we're going to start seeing, here's how to watch movies. Here's how to pull stuff from your TiVo. Here's how to subscribe to a podcast. Here's how to... I think that's what they really need to do to differentiate the PSP from both DS and iPod, because Apple's coming after some of the PSP functionality, and so's Microsoft with Zune.
Yeah.
Well, Sony last week at the Comic-Con had one of their events, one of their panels was called PSP University, and it addressed a lot of that and teaching users how to use the PSP's different media functionality. And we weren't able to go. We actually were talking with Bungie at the time, but that does totally confirm exactly what you're expecting.
I'd like to talk a little bit about Zune, because there seems to be a lot of confusion about that. There's some things that we do know and things that we don't. So here's the stuff that we do know. Zune is nothing to do with Play for Sure. So Microsoft's existing buying media online strategy, Zune is something completely different. It's the name of the device, it's the name of the software, it's the name of the service. So it's iPod, iTunes Music Store. That's what Zune is. It's music and media, which we can assume is going to be movies and TV as well. We know that they are going to do a matching service with, if you've bought a song on iTunes, they will give you the same song through their service to encourage you to swap.
I've heard that they are not exactly sure on that, how they can do that.
Right.
Yeah, they haven't exactly said how that's going to happen.
The device is Wi-Fi. There's one coming out this year. It's not one device. There's several. There's going to be a nano kind of device, but there's also going to be additional devices with other functionality that are going to be branded Zune. And one of them is game related, but they haven't said it's a game. I think a lot of people are making assumptions that it's a game player, and we don't know that for certain.
What I've heard is if there is a game player, it'll be focused on like PopCap style games, simple games.
And the games support Live Anywhere stuff that they showed at E3.
Well, so where I see the potential emergence here is like we talked about before, and we talked about this, is the phone.
Yeah,
I definitely see this as something that'll be rolled into Windows Mobile 5, and you can see very easily see like an HTC device that has.
So the stuff that we know is very broad, very general, or it's a Wi-Fi device. We think I think that the assumption is that the box that comes out this year is going to be $400. The stuff we don't really know anything about is if there's going to be a game service, if there's going to be subscription service, if there's going to be Xbox support. I mean, they haven't said anything yet.
But, if you go read the tech community's response to the Zune, it's pretty overwhelmingly negative.
Right.
Everyone more or less says it's doomed to failure.
Because it's Microsoft saying, hey, we have this strategy that we're pushing through Vongo and Napster, and it's already out there, and now here's another one that's a bit like iTunes.
Well, it's exactly like iTunes. Like their idea of like circumventing iTunes was to make their own iTunes, and that's not.
But
if I read correctly, which I'll preface because people always catch me if I don't, the Zune is not Plays for Sure compatible. Is that correct?
No, it's completely different.
Which is absurd.
So if you pull stuff down off Napster, it will not play on a Zune player. So there's a lot of stuff that, particularly in our little space, that people are talking about Zune as, this is Microsoft's Game Boy. It really isn't. This is Microsoft's iPod.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's Microsoft's iPod, and potentially down the road they might think about some of that, because they have talked about branding like a live branding name on stuff.
Right, and I think we're going to see live in just about everything that Microsoft does, because they want to make sure. I mean, the fact that it's a device with Wi-Fi in it, I think, is really significant, and we'll see some of that maybe gameplay support stuff. But I'd be
we saw with the Forza thing.
Yeah, but I think I'd be very surprised if we really do see them come after PSP and DS with this particular. There'll be another thing that doesn't work with Zune that we'll see later.
All right, so that's about the end of the show for the day. But before we get out of here, if you haven't this week, we do have a cover story up that we did. That Milky went over to Japan, visited with Mitsugushi for a while. Did you have more?
No, Skip says question of the week, but did not. We hit it.
We hit question of the week.
Yeah.
We ask question of the week.
Were you not listening, Skip? Skip wasn't paying attention.
Objection.
Shall we reiterate the question of the week? Just
Yeah, Garnet, keep talking about the Q feature. I'll dig up the question of the week.
So anyway, Milky was over there in Japan, visited with Miz for a while. Tremendous. I mean, there's an overwhelming amount of stuff to get through there. But if you start one place, get into the BPM. That was the feature you read, right, Skip? That chronicles Milk's visit over there. There's a great video where he sits down with the Q guys and talks about the future. They talk about hints that there could be a potentially future Rez. Which would be awesome, especially considering the other night we were in Milky's office and he had Rez on and he cranked up the bass and we were playing the hidden level. Have you ever played the hidden level? Oh my God, the bass drop on that thing is sick. That game holds up really well. Space Channel 5?
Not so much.
That doesn't hold up quite as well, does it? Anyway, so that's a Q cover. Also out today, according to Major Nelson, is the 99 Nights demo. And I know you don't care, right? I played it a couple times. I thought it was fun.
Read the review, EGM.
Yeah, I know you guys didn't like it so well, but if you're looking for something to do this weekend, hop on live. It's on the marketplace apparently today, which is weird because that's another Friday demo release. 99 Nights up there on marketplace. So Luke, question of the week for those who might have missed it, since it was incorporated into the pros,
including our producer.
Yeah, the question is who do you blame for the sort of demonization by mainstream media of video games and the way that video games are discussed in sort of popular culture and in mainstream media? Is it a matter of video games are responsible for the bed that they've made and they're responsible for the way that they're discussed by mainstream media, or is mainstream media just compartmentalizing video games and reducing it to sort of a lowest common denominator packaging, and because it's easier and it's flashier and it draws better headlines?
So that's a very long way of saying, who do you blame?
Yep.
Yeah, whose fault is it?
Where's the buck stop?
One last thing to address
Another
before we
last
get out
thing?
of here.
This is like our third or fourth last thing.
This is the epic last thing. There's been a bunch of posts on our boards about other podcasts sort of aping what we've been doing. And I've gone back and listened to the podcasts in question. And they are approaching things from a very different angle than we do. And I would be interested to see what your feedback is on their approach versus ours. And if you want to leave that on our message boards, that'd be fine.
Or
I'll
theirs.
read it there. Or theirs, yeah, absolutely.
Wherever.
But
Or iTunes.
But don't come to our message boards and tell us how you got banned because we don't care. Don't go to their message boards and be idiots. Just be respectful, listen, criticize intelligently.
We want to get all of the podcasts out there more, and iTunes is really important for all of us for getting out there. And I think the more successful more podcasts are, the better it is.
Yep.
For us to be
I think
self-serving.
Yeah, it's like I said the first time it was asked, isn't it good to have everybody talking about it? Isn't that what we need to be doing? Isn't
Better that than just the same old stuff.
And it's okay that what you're listening to this week we talked about a month ago. That's okay. That's okay. That's sort of, we're used to that relationship with some of our competitors. It's okay.
Oh my God.
And it's okay that it's okay that maybe maybe we take a little.
And that's it for this week.
And that, my friends, is where the buck stops for this week. We'll see you next week on Friday. Till then, we're out.
Months behind.
This has been One Up Yours, a production of the Ziff Davis Game Group and part of the One Up Radio Network. One Up Yours is hosted by Garnet Lee and John Davison, produced by Andrew Pfister and Mike Ng, and is published every Friday afternoon at podcast.oneup.com and at the iTunes Music Store.
What's up? I'm not in the fucking credits.